On today's show, we interviewed Tom Golisano, the founder of the $28 billion company, Paychex. On today's show, he shares with us how he took $3,000 in a credit card and turned it into a $1 billion net worth. Tom also shares with us how he was able to build his net worth by solving a problem that 95% of small business owners have. This right here, folks, is a laser show with Tom Golisano. Did you know that Tom Golisano was once the owner of the NHL's Buffalo Sabres? And now he's the author of the new book, Built Not Born, a self-made billionaire's no-nonsense guide for entrepreneurs like you.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we get to interview today's guest about how he, Dr. Z, built a $28 billion business. Tom, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure.
Hey, how are things in Florida right now? Is the weather fine? How are things in beautiful Florida?
Well, I'm looking out the window. It's about 80 degrees and pure sunshine. Everything is nice and green. It's wonderful here.
Now, that's a
Down in Naples.
That's a long distance from Naples, Florida, to where you started your career in Rochester, New York. When did you first figure out what you wanted to do professionally?
Well, quite frankly, I thought you were going to ask me when I figured out I wanted to get out of snow and cold weather. And that was when I was a pretty young guy. But I decided I wanted to be in business for myself, probably in my college days. I had some experiences watching my father in business, who eventually ended up going bankrupt. And I saw some of the things he went through, and I envisioned some of the things I wouldn't do if I was in that position. And so when I went to college, I just focused entirely on the idea that someday I wanted to be in business. I think being an entrepreneur is the only way to go.
Where did you?
Not for everybody, but at least for me.
Where did you go to college?
I went to a small 2-year college in Alfred, New York, called Alfred State Tech. It was in the southern tier of the state.
Are they going to rename it Paychex University?
That name is already used in our training department.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure they're proud of you. Now, how did you first start the company? Were you in the dorm room helping your buddies write paychecks for their side hustles, or how did you start Paychex?
Well, actually, I was working for a company that did payroll processing for larger companies. Their target market was 50 employees up to 500 employees. And I was in sales, and then they eventually made me a sales manager, and I was driving down the street one day, and I got to thinking, most businesses in America have less than 50 employees. So I went to the library to verify that, and I found out 98% of all American businesses have less than 100 employees.
Wow.
And 95% have less than 50 employees. And I decided that was a market nobody was attacking or going after. So I decided, based on my knowledge working for that payroll processing company, to make some modifications to their product and how they operated, and put it together to see if I could come up with a product line or a payroll processing product that would fit the need. And basically, I did 3 things that were different in those days. Back in the 60s and 70s, people used to have to fill out fairly complicated computer input sheets, which means they had to be trained on how to do it, and then the information had to be physically transferred to the payroll processor by delivery or by mail. I got the idea, for example, an average 15-employee company, they could just call in on the telephone. A trained operator, a professional on the other end, would extract from the client exactly what they wanted to accomplish for their particular employees. It was cheaper, and it was much more accurate than the customer filling out an input sheet. The second thing is, back in those days, nobody in the payroll processing business was completing payroll tax returns. If you're an employer in the New York State, for example, you have a minimum of 52 payroll tax returns and payments that must be made every year. And if you don't do it properly and on time, the fines are pretty strong. And third, we had a price that so small companies could afford it. The average minimum charge back in 1970 was about $24 a pay period, only if you had one or two employees. Well, we brought it down to about $1 a check or $1 a person.
Yep.
And charging at that level. Now, when I had all these ideas, I went to my employer and I said, let's start up this division. I'd be glad to run it or, be a major part of it. They said they didn't want to go after the small company market. They didn't think it was going to be profitable. It's the best thing that happened to me because I resigned a few months later and started Paychex.
Paychex is a company that my wife and I use for our businesses. And see, I'm always amazed at how they do it so inexpensively. I'm serious. I'm not just saying this because he's on our show. I mean, I've been using Paychex forever. And my wife and I have thought about, in years past, as you're looking at the budget, you might say, let's see if we can trim costs in area A or B. And we're always saying to ourselves, we could not possibly provide a service. We couldn't do this ourselves.
Hire somebody to replace that. Yes.
I'm just blown away. I'm getting nervous here. I'm so blown away. What questions do you have for the founder of Paychex? Because this guy has been solving my problems for years. I feel like I owe him a debt of gratitude.
I go by Dr. Z, so I'm going to call you. Is it okay if I call you Mr. G? Is that good?
You can call me anything you want.
Oh, there you go, buddy. I've got a question. You own a super yacht, correct?
Yes, I do.
Now, did you get to name your super yacht? I mean, how does that work? Are they already named when the guy constructing them? Because yours is named, if you still have it, it's named Laurel, from what I find online. Did you name that? And so, what does that name mean to you?
Not much. Basically, I'm the second owner of the boat.
Oh, okay.
And the previous owners had called it Laurel. And when I took it over, we decided we'd leave the name the same because it does do a certain amount of charter business. And we didn't want people to lose track of the boat because we changed the name. By the way, can I go to our low pricing for a minute?
Oh, absolutely.
Would you like us to raise your prices? Would you feel better?
No.
Hey,
We use Paychex also.
I mean this seriously.
Nancy.
My wife and I, we've talked about this, and we were saying this is years ago. It's like, how in the world do they do it so inexpensively? Now, obviously, you guys have gotten more efficient over time, but how did you go out there and get your first 10 customers? Did you just cold call? Did you show up? Were you doing
You know what I did? Huh? I put together a mailing list from the Rochester Chamber of Commerce and sent out about 3,000 letters early in November of 1970. And I was hoping to get 60 clients out of that mailing. I ended up getting 6.
Wow.
So I had gone through all my money by then,
6.
Ended up with 6 clients. So from then it was, beg, borrow, and almost the other thing. But it took me 4 years to get my goal of 300 clients. I ended up the first year with about 40. So it was a long haul. It went 4 years without a payroll check. Good thing my wife took on a job in a charitable organization. But we survived it, and then it was just a matter of adding clients year after year.
What was your low point when growing the business? Because, Dr. Z, you started your first business. I started my first business. I know I worked at Applebee's, Target, and DirecTV when I was starting DJConnection.com. And I remember vividly eating ramen noodles, having no disposable income to speak of, being in a tight spot, sharing the one car that barely worked. Tom, what was your absolute lowest point when building Paychex?
Well, one of the things that happened to me is I took a few of the people, and we only had a few working, out for dinner one night for some sort of minor celebration. And we went to a popular steakhouse in town, and we had dinner, and I still had my American Express card. My other 2 cards, MasterCard and Visa, had been taken away. But I still had my American Express card. I paid for the dinner with the American Express card. And the owner, who I knew, came back to me with my American Express card cut in half, and he said he was directed by American Express to do that. I was no longer going to get credit. So obviously that was quite embarrassing. So fortunately, he was a client. So I said, how would it be if I just add or subtract my charge for our dinner against your bill, and your bill will be reduced, and I'm getting out of here with some sort of posture left.
Wow.
But
You
that
didn't
was
have
the
to
low
watch-
point. I remember friends coming over to the house. I remember one time a good friend of mine came over. He opened up the refrigerator door. I mean, we were that close, and there was nothing in it.
That's
So
a good diet plan.
having gone through that, it sounds like you've gone through a little bit of it yourself. It's a real character builder.
So how did you fund the scaling of the business? I mean, you said it took you 4 years, I believe, to get to 300 clients. How did you fund the scaling of Paychex, which today, Z, has 670,000 customers? Tom, how'd you do it?
Correct. Well, after I got established in Rochester, New York, with about 300 clients, a friend of mine came into the office, and his name was Phil Wareheim, and Phil said, Tom, this looks like you're going to make it. Is there any way I can get involved? And I said, well, how would you like to be a partner with me in the cities of Albany, Syracuse, and Buffalo? And he said, yeah, we'll do that. And we agreed to it. He got started, and a couple of months later, an employee of a client came into my office, said, Tom, this is really great service. I'd like to go somewhere in the United States and start one. I said, where would you like to go? He says, well, Miami, Florida. So I thought to myself, gee, being a partner with somebody in Miami, that's not bad.
There we go.
So when I mentioned the word partnership, he said to me, oh, no, I want to be your franchisee. Now, that was a whole new thought, but it meant, me helping him get started, maybe an initial fee and a percentage of revenue. And I said, okay, and he went off to Miami, Florida. After I got these two individuals started, I said, gee, is this a way to build a national organization? So during the next 4 years, I brought into the company 10 different partners and 6 different franchisees. They all, except one, lived in Rochester, New York, and they moved to various parts of the country. And we got started that way. We had a goal, or at least I had a goal, that we would someday consolidate into one company and either be a public corporation or else sell out to another company.
And
Every year we added salespeople. We tried to average 7% more salespeople every year. Today we have over 2,500 people in the field as sales representatives.
wow. Okay, so now you got 2,500 people in the field. Z, they're out there selling 670,000 customers. One yacht, one super yacht, by the way. This is not a little dinghy out there. This is a super yacht.
Yeah, not a dinghy.
So when did you get inspired to write your new book? I mean, tell us about your new book. What's it called? What inspired you to write this new book?
Okay, the book is called Built, Not Born. Built, Not Born. We picked that title because it sort of very well described the process. Wasn't born with any money, didn't inherit any, et cetera, et cetera. Built it from scratch. When I started the company, I had $3,000 and 3 credit cards in my name. People have been asking me to write a book, and my first thought was to write an autobiography. But in talking to various publishers, one of them suggested, why don't you write a business book first? And I said, gee, that might be a good idea. And while I'm talking to him on the phone, I started writing down a table of contents about what I would want to say. And it flowed real easy. So I decided to write the business book. HarperCollins is the publisher, and it's being released in middle of February.
I would like to get your take on this because your book title is Built Not Born, a self-made billionaire's no-nonsense guide for entrepreneurs. Now, Z, I'm going to ask, it's like a passive-aggressive mentorship session for you right now. So I've got a friend, Tom, hypothetically. He goes by last name Zellner, not this Zellner, but a different one. And he only owns about 10% of a bank. And he's struggling. He's got the optometry clinic that's doing the most revenue in his state. Not you, it's someone else. And a very successful auto auction and other companies. And he wants to build he wants to get to the B zone. He wants to go from the M zone to the B zone, from the millionaire status to the billionaire status. What tip would you have for my friend? Not our co-host here, not you, but someone else.
Somebody else.
What tip would you
Very
have for
similar.
somebody who's already a multimillionaire who wants to become a billionaire?
Well, the way we did it, and the way I probably would advise people to do it, is do it in plateaus. When Paychex had 50,000 clients, we set our sight on 100,000 clients. And when we got 100, we set our sights on 250 and so forth until we got it up to the point that we're at. The other thing, we did a very good job, combination of luck and good management. We picked a market that's huge. The number of small businesses in the United States is at least 12 to 15 million of them. And even today, with our success and other companies' successes, if you add all the payroll processors together, we still only have about 20% of the market. So it's a huge marketplace. So that's one of the things that served us very, very well. But the other thing is we didn't try to do it in big gulps. We did it in small plateaus. And when you have a product that works and you can make money at it, that's a good way to go.
So how do you differentiate yourself? So if 80% of that, like you said, you have 20% of the available marketplace. How many of that, do you know how many of the others are using a payroll company, and how do you differentiate from those other payroll companies?
Well, if there's, let's say there's 15 million businesses, and that means the payroll processors altogether have about 3 million. And I think that's pretty close to being very accurate. How do we differentiate ourselves? Well, you're a client. I hope you feel you get very personal service, and we're very responsive.
Yes.
We have software that I think is very comprehensive and fits most situations, so people don't need to change services. We're, as you said earlier, we price fairly low, so that we're very competitive in that area. The fourth thing I would say is our sales organization is very well trained in the product and the product knowledge. You're not going to buy a payroll service from a salesperson that comes in your door and doesn't seem to know what they're talking about and not very confident. So we spend a lot of time and effort training our salespeople on our service, how it works, and the benefits to the customer.
Z, I'll say this. As far as Paychex, I have my 3 reasons I love these guys. One is the pricing is unbelievable. 2, they're super accurate. And I mean, the price, the accuracy, the other thing is they say yes all the time. You call and say, I have a question, and they go, yes, how can I help you? And I've dealt with other payroll companies, and Z, you've probably dealt with this too, where they can't give you a straight answer. No one calls you back. I mean, these guys do it right. I really do like this. And I think you, Tom, are a source of wisdom on a lot of things. But in your book, you write about some stuff that I think is controversial. And so I would like to bring up some of the things. And if you don't like the question, you just hang up, and that'll be our little code, Z, that he doesn't like the question. Okay, so here we go.
Fair enough.
Hey,
in your book,
go for it.
You talk
go
about
for it, Clay.
Well, you talk about writing a prenuptial or even a postnuptial agreement, and it's very critical to any business owner. You're saying it's very critical for any business owner to have a prenuptial and a postnuptial agreement. Could you explain what a prenuptial and a postnuptial agreement is, and why you think it's important for any business owner?
Well, a prenuptial agreement is an agreement between two parties who are about to get married as to how they would distribute assets that they accumulate or come in with at the time of the marriage. Postnup is just an agreement written after a marriage when the two parties decide it's appropriate. Here's why it's so important. I'm sure you've heard of business people that have gone into business, no prenuptial agreement or post. They go into business, they're successful, and then one day they decide that they're going to split up. Well, that puts the entrepreneur in a real bad situation because chances are he's going to have to make some sort of payments to the other spouse, and that may require that the business be sold. And there you are now in a situation where the business has to be sold. You're not going to be selling it at the time you want to sell it most naturally, or at a time when you can maximize the sale price. So it ends up being a real tussle, and sometimes could make a divorce proceeding very, very sensitive and very, very difficult.
What I'm going to do is we have some listeners out there who are saying this right away. I can hear the listeners saying this right now. They're going, but what would be the point of being married to somebody, Tom, if you're not committed to it working out? Somebody out there is thinking this, and they're going, by signing a prenuptial, I'm before it even starts, conceding that it's not going to work out. I know that's the argument people are saying out there. What would you say to that?
I would say a prenup or a postnup is a contingency item, okay? But we also have to remember 50% of the marriages today in the United States of America end up in divorce, and that's a reality you got to face. But keep in mind, 60, 70, or 100 years ago, when the life expectancy was so different than it is today, or 200 years ago. But today, marriages being so long, and people change, and their desires change, their motivations change, and a postnup or a prenup will, take care of that contingency so that when the time comes, unfortunately, if it does come, it'll be more easily settled.
Tom, I definitely get the prenup. I've heard about those. I know about those. I understand. But postnup, this is kind of one of the first times I've heard about that move.
Ooh.
How do you bring that? How do you bring that up over what you do, a cocktail hour? And you're like, hey, honey, guess what? I think's a great idea.
Now that we're together and things are working out well, my good buddy, the billionaire Tom, the founder of Paychex, he asked me. He told me the advice he's given us is on this book I opened up here. It says we should get together and talk about how we're going to break it up.
Yeah, because it's a coin flip. No, I totally get it, but I mean that's a super move right
This
there.
is a controversial book.
Postnup. That's kind of a super move because
being part of a business person, you have to be a pretty good negotiator too.
There you go. That's true.
Okay, now, Tom, I have another question for you here. In your book, again, this is a new book, Built, Not Born, a self-made billionaire's no-nonsense guide for entrepreneurs. In the book, you talk about this idea of going against the grain to generate opportunities. Are you talking about petting a cat backwards, or what are you talking about?
Well, I thought I gave you an example earlier. The payroll processing industry back in the 60s and 70s was focused on a much different market than Paychex focused on. It went after larger companies. Paychex, our desire was to go after the low end of the market for two reasons. Number one, there were so many more of them, more small businesses than larger businesses that would fall into the Paychex range. And secondly, and here's a little bit of the key to Paychex's success, the way payroll processors process is they charge you per check created. In other words, one for every one of your employees. The more employees you have on the payroll, the lesser per check you're going to pay to a payroll processor.
Got it.
In other words, if you're a 100-person payroll, you may only pay 50 cents a check. I'm just pulling these numbers out of the air.
Yeah.
You may only pay 50 cents a check. But if you're a 5-person payroll, your total bill might be $7, which means you're paying $1.40 a check. The revenue from 10-person payrolls is 2.5 times more than it would be for a 100-person payroll. Did you get that?
Yep.
The revenue for 10 tens would be 2.5 times greater than a 100-person payroll. Now, I think it's easier to sell 10 tens than 100 because all the other processors are going after those large clients.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to sell the 10 tens, and the respective overhead is not consistent with the fact that it's 10 companies instead of one. In other words, we can do 10 payrolls almost as easily as we can do 100.
There's got to be something that you do or a worldviews that you have that most people don't have, because a lot of people just don't become millionaires, let alone billionaires. Do you have maybe, in addition to your book, do you have maybe some books that you'd recommend, or do you have a kind of a pithy quote that you like to share with people, or what's your big tip for our listeners out there?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you one. Some people ask me if I've had a mentor.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a mentor. What I've had is a bunch of negative mentors. In other words, as a salesperson for Paychex and for the company I sold before and the company that Burroughs Corporation, I was exposed to a lot of small business people. And I learned a lot more watching them operate when they were doing well rather than when they were doing great. So I learned watching people make mistakes. I think that helped the most. Also, I think I did a pretty good job of keeping the company focused, both on product line and achieving sales quotas. That was number one importance to our management team, that we always met our sales quotas and sales goals.
Tom, I've got a question for you. If you could go back, say, the mid-'70s, you got Paychex started in 71. You've kind of hit that critical mass of right at that point where you said in your interview earlier, you said, it looks like you're going to make it. Your friend said, looks like you're going to make it. If you could go back to that time frame. Going back in the old time machine and talk to yourself, what would you say to yourself at that time?
Well, a number of things. I'll give you one is, as soon as we went public, I came out with a product line that was much different than what we were doing. It was similar to Monster.com, but it was before the internet. Now, we made an investment in it, but the sad part of it, or the bad part of it, was Wall Street did not like us going into a diversified business, much different than what we were doing so soon after going public. So our stock price suffered for some period of time because of that. Now, after a year, I said, that's enough, and we closed it down. Secondly, I said we brought in 10 partners and 6 franchisees. I probably could have done it with fewer people.
Sure.
And just made their territories larger. Then I would have had less people to deal with.
Yeah, excellent.
And that probably could be positive.
There you go. And now on a personal note, I've been looking at your bio and kind of doing some research on you. A very interesting life you've led. But if you could go back, say, a few years ago, and you could either, one, own a professional NFL football team or be the governor of New York, which one would you choose?
Well, I've never wanted to own an NFL team. I owned a hockey team, the Buffalo Sabres.
Right.
And that was a great experience over an 8-year period. I did want to be governor. I tried to be governor 3 times as an independent in New York State, which is a tough road to hoe. The 2 major parties have so much strength in New York State. It's hard for an independent to get elected. But I would have loved that challenge back then. I really would have.
I have a couple final questions here. I've noticed you've donated throughout your career $250 million. Is that correct? You've donated over $250 million to charities thus far. Is that right?
Actually, it's over $300 million now.
$300 million. What kind of charities do you give to? And what kind of charities? I mean, what do you look for in the charities that you give back to?
Okay, actually, there's 2 categories of charities. I have a son that's intellectually developmentally disabled, and Stephen is now in his early 50s, but because of his experience, he and his mother, we've given quite a bit to organizations that deal with people with developmental disabilities. We have a foundation set up in our name. It gives out approximately $2 million a year through the foundation. Also, there's a lot of organizations in any community, hospitals and schools, that type of thing, and we've probably hit most of them. At least I know we've hit most of them in the Rochester, New York area. Now we're expanding down to Southwest Florida. So individuals with developmental disabilities is a major one, but we also help as many schools, colleges, and universities and hospitals as we can. We have 3 children's hospitals named after us, one in Rochester, one in Syracuse, and one in Naples.
Well, I'm not sure what series, Z, of poor life choices that Tom made to end up on our show. But this is, I mean, we've had Wolfgang Puck on the show, and I know he was confused as to how it happened. We've had John Maxwell on the show. We've had so many great people. But this was one of my favorite interviews. This was awesome, Tom. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
I appreciate doing it.
Hey, well, I tell you what, if we're ever in the Naples, Florida area, we're going to bring out our megaphone. We have a megaphone. Z, do we not have a megaphone in the studio?
We actually do have a megaphone.
And if you hear some guys running around the water shore area.
The harbor, looking for Laurel.
Saying,
we're looking for a former owner of the Buffalo Sabres here. We're looking for Tom Golisano. Tom.
If you hear us, just wave at us, and that way we'll know that you know that's us.
Or duck and run.
Yeah.
That, those are your 2
Tell
choices.
you what, why don't you give me a call and I'll buy you lunch?
Oh, there
we're
we
in.
go.
We're
Naples,
in.
I'm booking Naples.
And you are a customer, right?
We are.
Oh, yes. Of
Oh,
course,
yes.
you can write it off. Yeah, even better.
We're doing lunch. I'm coming out there, Tom.
We're coming in hot.
All righty.
That right there was a blasty blast. I encourage everybody out there, if you are stuck in a rut and you don't know how to grow your business, and you can't afford one-on-one coaching, and you can't afford to get to a workshop, why don't you check out our online school? It's just $19 a month, And you go to thrivetimeshow.com and you click on the business school button. So again, go to thrivetimeshow.com and click on the business school button. And there for just $19 a month, you can have access to millionaires and mentors via video, people, super success stories just like today's guest. I mean, if you want access to Michael Levine, the world's top branding and PR expert, or Lee Cockrell, the former executive vice president of Walt Disney World Resorts, who once managed 40,000 employees at one time and 1 million customers per week, you can have access to all that for just $19 a month. Check it out today by going to thrivetimeshow.com and clicking on the business school button, and there you can subscribe. You can check it out. And if you have enough money to do it, if you got the money in your pocket, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of Tom's new book. He doesn't need your money, but he does need to share the wisdom that he has learned over the years. I mean, this guy's given away over $300 million of money to charities, and he's written a book, not to make a quick profit off you, but to teach you the skills and the principles that he's learned en route to building a billion-dollar business, a $28 billion business known as Paychex. His new book is called Built, Not Born, a self-made billionaire's no-nonsense guide for entrepreneurs. Check it out today. Again, it's Built, Not Born, a self-made billionaire's no-nonsense guide for entrepreneurs. And now, without any further ado, we like to end each and every show with a boom, which stands for big, overwhelming, optimistic momentum, because we know that's what it takes to build a successful company. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom! What if you could gain access to download each and every book that I've ever written for free? Well, that'd be terrible, because I don't like you. Okay, we're making a big assumption here. But assuming that you do like me and you like the Thrive Time Show, you can now go to thrivetimeshow.com/free-resources. That's thrivetimeshow.com/free-resources to download each and every book that I've ever written for free. You can download the ebook version of each and every book that I've ever written for free.
Clay, I just want to chime in here real quick. I don't like you or capitalism. I feel like we should all get free stuff.
Well, I am in the process of explaining where you can get free stuff. And you can now also download all the helpful infographics. There's infographics on Firing 101, the perfect hiring system, the principles from Ray Dalio, Internet Marketing 101, the Lead Bin Management System, Managing Humans 101, Logo Creation 101, Why Google Loves WordPress, Time Management 101. We also have an incredible infographic about the importance of calling your leads often, because the average person no longer answers their phone unless they are called multiple times and unless they receive a text from you. We also have the importance of File Nomenclature 101, Sales Lead Conversion 101, and much, much more. And it's all available for you to download for free right now by going to thrivetimeshow.com.
Are you suggesting that I should have to move my body?
Yes.
This is for free. Isn't there a way you could just beam it? I mean, why do I have to move my body?
Because
typing causes me anxiety.
Whatever.
Which is why I would never go to thrivetimeshow.com.
Come on.
/free-resources. I would never go to thrivetimeshow.com. /free-resources.
All right, let me clarify. If you have the capacity to move your fingers, go to thrivetimeshow.com /free-resources to download an ebook version of every single Amazon best-selling book I've ever written and all the infographics that have the power to change your life.